Hi, it's Penny here, and this year I'm going to have a go at doing the fantasy over on Reddit, their bingo card. Basically a bingo card of different reading prompts to try and inspire your reading for the year. And I love making lists of books, so this seemed like a good excuse to do that. And I saw some other booktubers doing this, so I thought, sounds like fun. I am going to try as much as possible to use books I already am planning on reading for this list, because I already have many lists of books that I want to read this year. But maybe I can also use this to motivate me to get to some of these. So I have made a plan. Let me share it with you. We're going to start row by row, basically. So the first row, the first square, is Knights and Paladins, and the prompt is to read a book where one of the protagonists is a paladin or a knight. And I've heard that The Devils by Joe Abercrombie will fulfill this prompt. I did really love The First Law World by Joe Abercrombie, and I was planning to pick up The Devils anyway. I think it's something about Europe being under threat from some kind of demons, and this guy being put in charge of this ragtag group of people, let's call them, to go and fight these demons. He's called in the synopsis Brother something. I don't know if he's the knight or paladin or if it's another one of the characters, but I've heard that this will fulfill the prompt, including hard mode where the character has an oath or a promise to keep. I am trying as much as possible on this list to get hard mode, but I think I'm going to fall short of getting hard mode for the whole board. Oh, but also I'm a completionist, so like I'm going to want to read every book on this bingo card. It's a bingo card though, right? Like you still win as long as you get bingo. That's what I need to remind myself. Then the second prompt is a hidden gem. So this is a book with under 1,000 ratings on Goodreads. I'm going to read Legacy by Fiti Hiriaka. So this only has currently 155 ratings on Goodreads, and it also meets hard mode, which is that it was published 5 or more years ago because it was published in 2018. This one, in my head, I've always been calling it Kindred, but a YA book focused on more Maori culture. I believe it's this young boy and he gets hit by a bus or something and then wakes up following his great grandfather fighting in Egypt as part of the Maori contingent. And then he's also kind of investigating in the future what's happened there. Even though I don't tend to like YA books, the general concept sounds interesting, and I have loved some stuff by Fiti Hiriaka before, so I'm hoping I'll still enjoy this, at least to some degree. Then the next book is to read a book published in the 80s, and for this I'm going to be reading The Matriarch by Witi Ihimaera. So this is a New Zealand Maori author, and I just kind of randomly recently had this come up on my radar. Again, I think it's a story about a guy kind of trying to research this legend about the matriarch, who is someone who supposedly, or this woman who supposedly like helped to protect the Maori people from the invasion of the Pākehā. I don't really know much about it because I only just saw about it recently, but it's from 1986, and hard mode is to read a book written by an author of color, so that's this. Then the next prompt is high fashion, where you need to read a book where clothing, fashion, or fiber arts are a part of the plot. For this, I'm going to read, I forget the name of the series. The first book's called Ithaca. It's kind of a retelling of the myth of Penelope, which was Odysseus's wife. A retelling of her by Claire North. I've liked some of Claire North's stuff before, but like more her speculative, weird, literary sci-fi works. So this is a little bit different, and I'm interested to see how I'll like it. I've put the first book on the bingo board, but I'm not sure, knowing the myth of Penelope. So Penelope is often referred to as the weaver, because the idea is that when Odysseus was off mucking around, they were trying to convince her to remarry, and she basically said, no, I need to weave this thing first, and then once I've done that, I'll remarry. But then at night she was like undoing everything that she'd done. So like that's got to be the plot of the book at some point. Will it be in the first book in the series? I don't know, but I'll probably read the whole series, so at some point that should meet the prompt. And hard mode is that it's the main character who makes clothes or fibers, so I think it'll meet hard mode as well. Then the last prompt on this row is down with the system, and the idea is to read a book where the main plot revolves around disrupting the system. And hard mode is if it isn't a government system. I'm hoping that I can meet this with Translation State by Anne Leckie, because I'm reading this in April. That's my plan already. This is about, basically there are these humans. Are they really humans? I'm not really sure, but they're like translators between these aliens and the humans. And we're following this particular one who doesn't want to kind of live that life anymore. Also, I know that in this world at the same time, the AI characters from the original trilogy, of which this is a spin-off, are like trying to gain their independence. But I think that might be too close to disrupting the government. This, though, I'm not sure how much it revolves around that government disruption. It might be more of a disruption of the way that these translators work. I do have another couple of books on my TBR that I can swap in if this doesn't meet it, but I'm hoping to meet it with this. Okay, then moving on to the second row of the bingo board. Firstly, we have impossible places. So this says to read a book set in a location that would break a physicist. The geometry, non-Euclidean. The volume, bigger on the inside. The directions, merely a suggestion. And hard mode is at least 50% of the book takes place within the impossible place. So again, this is another one where I look for suggestions because I wasn't sure. And the suggestion is Piranesi. So I have really wanted to read Piranesi. I've heard... Am I pronouncing that different every time? Maybe. I've heard great things about this. It sounds really weird. I did see an argument that this doesn't really meet the prompt because Piranesi is an unreliable narrator. And so like, is the world really as impossible as he's making it out to be? I don't really know. But anyway, that's what I'm going to try and fulfill this prompt with. Maybe I have to think of all of these as try because once I read them, I might decide they don't meet the prompt. I guess we'll see. Then we have a book in parts, and the idea is to read a book that's separated into large sections or parts. And hard mode is that there is at least 4 or more parts. This is another one where it's hard to know until you get into the book. So I look for suggestions, and the suggestion is The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. So this one is something about these people trying to save this moon god, but I believe it's written like as a story within a story, and also maybe there's another story going on at the same time. I've heard it's weird. I'm hoping it'll be weird. It's also a 5-star prediction for me, so I'm hoping to love it. Then we have Gods and Pantheons, so read a book featuring divine beings. And hard mode is that there are multiple pantheons, and I've heard that A Master of Jinn counts for this by P. Jelly Clark. This is a story about this woman. I've read the first chapter, I've kind of forgotten. This woman who's like helping to track down like rogue jinns or like investigating murders that were done by like a rogue jinn. And again, apparently it includes multiple pantheons of gods. So that's the book. Then the next prompt is to read the last book in a series, and hard mode is for the series to be 4 or more books long. So I'm going to count for this Age of Empire, which is the last book in the Age of Legends of the Last Empire. Wait, I have the first book behind me because I'm meant to be starting this next month. The Legends of the First Empire, the series is called. So I'll start this next month, and then I should finish it before the end of the year. And it's a 6-book series, so it counts. And I haven't really started the series yet, so I don't know, but I think there's like elves versus humans, big like world-ending conflicts. I'll know better once I get into it. Then the last prompt for this line is to read in a fantasy book club or read-along book, with hard mode being to read one like while it's being read this year. So I'm going to keep an eye out for read-alongs and see whether I try and get hard mode or not. But I also went through the list of books that have been read as like read-alongs or book clubs in the past for our fantasy, and I found The Raven Tower by Anne Leckie, so another book by Anne Leckie, and I already had this on my 5-star predictions. I can't really tell you about the synopsis though. It's something about a kingdom that's always been ruled by the god, and the person on the throne is chosen by the god, but now that the god is losing his power, someone else has taken over the throne, and there's a bunch of drama and secrets. I have a lot of faith in Anne Leckie at this point, so I'm hoping to really love it. Okay, then moving on to row 3. So the first square is parent protagonist, so to read a book where the main character has to take care of a child. And hard mode is where the child is also a major character in the story. So for this, I'm going to pick up The Reindeer People by Megan Lindholm, which is a pen name for Robin Hobb. So in this, I've read the first chapter. There's this woman who is a healer, and she's living with this tribe, but she's thinking about trying to leave because some of the things that are going on in this group are not that great, including the way that the shaman has been trying to train up her young son, who seems to be like some kind of neurodivergent, perhaps autistic. And we did get a little bit of his perspective at the beginning of the book as well. And so she wants to leave, but it's just coming into winter, so she's kind of trying to decide, is this a great time? Especially, like, it would be fine if it was just me, but I also have my son to worry about. And I'm pretty sure that, like, the magic that he's involved in is going to be a pretty major part of the plot as well. Then the next prompt is epistolary, so this is to read a book where it's predominantly written as, like, letters or articles or diary entries. And hard mode is to read one entirely written in that format. The one I'm going to try is Parable of the Sower, which I wanted to read anyway. It's kind of like a apocalyptic type story, I think, where the main character ends up creating her own religion. I have tried the beginning of this, but I can't remember if it was all in journal format. It might not quite meet hard mode, but I wanted to read it anyway, so that's what I'm going to use for this. Then the next prompt is to read a book published in 2025, and hard mode is to read one where it's the author's debut. I have a whole list of books coming out in 2025 that I wanted to read, and none of them were authors' debuts, but I would also like to read Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. I don't know much about it, but I'm hoping it'll be a little bit like Someone to Build a Nest In by John Wiswell, in that it's some kind of like creepy shapeshifter story, but also like a little bit cozy somehow. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. I guess we'll see what I get. Then the next prompt is to read a book by an author of color, and hard mode is for it to be a horror novel. I don't read a lot of horror, even though I have loved some of it, and I would like to try and figure out what kind of horror I like. But anyway, I had a look through my TBR, and there are two that perhaps fulfill the requirements. I'm gonna wait till I've read them to decide whether they lean into the horror element enough to really count. But the two I have is Certain Dark Places by Sylvia Morena Garcia, or Dawn by Octavia E. Butler. I know Dawn is a first contact with aliens story. I don't really know what Certain Dark Things is about, but it was tagged on Goodreads as horror, so maybe? To be honest, I just really love the cover and would really like an excuse to read it. Then the last prompt in this row is to read a book published by a small press or self-published. So for this, I just went to my list of books published by Huia, which is a local publisher that publishes Maori authors that I often pick up a lot of books from. And hard mode for this is one that has under 100 ratings on Goodreads, or was written by a marginalized author. So I think this counts for both of them. I'm going to pick up Watched by Tehima Baker. This is some kind of story about these young boys at a boarding school, and then they find themselves in this training facility for teens with superpowers. I don't really know whether I'm going to like it or not, but it does say that the powers they have is that they can manipulate gravity and harness dark energy. So that sounds like interesting powers that I'd like to see explored. Okay, then we're up to the fourth row, and the first prompt is Biopunk. So that is read a book that focuses on like biotechnology and or its consequences. And hard mode is there's no electricity-based technology. Again, I looked for recommendations and I saw The Stars A Legion by Cameron Hurley. I've really loved some things by Cameron Hurley before, and somehow this had kind of fallen off my radar, but I did want to pick it up. I don't really know what it's about, but I did see it listed as biopunk in quite a few places. And I think it's something, there's these world ships that are like kind of at war, and I think perhaps becoming quite run down. And I think we're just following some characters trying to end the war so that they can just focus on survival. Anyway, that will be for that prompt. The next prompt is Elves and Dwarves, and the prompt is to read a book which has elves and or dwarves. But I'm going to read Age of Myth, which I'm pretty sure has elves. Like, I'm confident it has elves. It should also have dwarves, because I know there are dwarves in this world. Hard mode is that the main character, or one of the main characters, is an elf or dwarf. I'm not sure. I think maybe this series might have that, but I won't be sure until I get into it. The next prompt is LGBTQIA Protagonist, so read a book with an LGBTQIA protagonist, and hard mode is that they are marginalized on at least one additional axis. So for that, I want to read, wait, I have it physically now, The Outside by Ada Hoffman. So this is a really weird story about like AI gods and this woman who's doing a science experiment in that world that goes wrong. But the woman is LGBT. I forget the exact details, but she has a girlfriend. And as well, she's autistic. It says autistic in the back. I think I remember from trying the first chapter that they had another like kind of cool term for it. Anyway, I'm very excited about reading about AI gods and all the weirdness that I'm hoping to get in this. The next prompt is 5 SFF short stories, prompt being to read 5 short stories, and hard mode is for them to all be part of one anthology. So the anthology I have is Far Reaches, stories to take you out of this world, and it's got the authors listed as James S. A. Corey, Veronica Roth, Rebecca Roanhorse, Anne Leckie, Nnedi Okorafor, and John Scalzi. So that's 6 short stories. So that fulfills the prompt. It's all part of one anthology. And also, I've loved things by most of those authors, so I've got high hopes for it. Then the last prompt on this row is Stranger in a Strange Land. So read a book that deals with a foreigner being in a new culture. And hard mode is that the main character is an immigrant or a refugee. So I'm going to read The Bone Orchard by Sarah A. Mueller. I've heard that the main character is like a traumatized refugee. And I've forgotten everything else about this book except that it's meant to be weird. Also, I've heard a lot of people not liking it, but the people I have seen liking it talked about it in a way that made me want to read it. So we're going to give it a go. Okay, so moving on to the last row. The first square on this row is to recycle a bingo square from a previous bingo board. I had a look. In 2024, there was a square called Character with a Disability, and the prompt is to read a book with a character with a disability. And I have behind me Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, which follows a woman who is disabled and I think kind of just struggling with her writing career and also her family. And it does talk in the synopsis about the story that she's writing, kind of like in some way blending with reality, but we'll see how that actually works out when I read it, because I've heard mixed things when people review it. Then next we have Cozy SFF. Now I don't read a lot of cozy books because I tend to like the complete opposite in books, like uncozy books. Emotionally traumatic, everything's going wrong kind of books. I like those. So Cozy SFF with its low stakes, happy ending, not always my thing, but I found one. I'm going to pick up Direct Descendant by Tanya Huff. Now, hard mode for this is to read a book by an author you've never read before. I have read from Tanya Huff before, but I just don't really like Cozy SFF, so the only ones I could find that I was interested in were ones by authors I've read from before. I'm going to say this almost counts in that I haven't read Tanya Huff for a long time, like probably maybe not quite 10 years, but definitely a long time. And I'm interested to see, because this is a new 2025 release, and the stuff I read by Tanya Huff before wouldn't have counted as cozy. So I'm interested to see her kind of coming back into publishing and publishing something quite different. I'm very interested to see what it will be like. So I don't really know what this one is about, but I can see it says our main character Cassidy is town baker and part-time servant of the Dark Force. It's a family business. She has to contend with a rising army of darkness, a very frustrated town, and a very cute PI who she might be falling for. Anyway, it's tagged as cozy. I'm going to try it. Then the next prompt is generic title, and the prompt is to read a book where the title has one or more of the following words: blood, bone, broken, court, dark, shadow, song, sword, or throne. And I had a few options for that, but hard mode is to read a title where it either has 2 of those words or it has 1 and also either a number, an animal, or a color. And I just can't find any that I want to read. What I do have, which I can almost count if I feel like cheating a bit, is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is like a YA kind of romantasy, so will it be to my taste? I'm not sure, but I have been interested in reading it. And bone is on the word list, and smoke, you could count smoke as a color. Maybe it's the best I can do. Then the second to last square is not a book. So the idea is to either watch something or play something with still a fantasy element to it. And then hard mode is to review it on our fantasy. So what I think I'm going to do for this is I'm going to play Doki Doki Literature Club. So this, I think, is kind of like a dating sim, except that while you're playing it, one of the characters becomes self-aware and like realizes that they're in a dating sim, and then I think it turns into kind of a horror. I don't know, I heard about it, it sounds intriguing, so I'll play that. And then the last square is pirates, and hard mode is to read a book where it's not seafaring pirates, and I have heard that the second book of the Books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft has air pirates. So I did have that series on my TBR, not necessarily right near the top, but I guess I'll bump it up a little bit so that I can get to air pirates. So that's going to be my 2025 fantasy bingo board. Maybe I'll end up swapping out a few as we go along if I find better options, but that's my plan. And maybe I'll see how quickly I can actually get bingo, because I want to count bingo as a win, not necessarily filling out the whole board, even though I would actually like to fill out the whole board. But I guess the bonus of this is that it goes until the end of March next year, so even if I don't quite get it done this year, I've got that little bit of spillover time. So let me know if you've read any of the books on this list, if you think I'm going to like them, or let me know if you're also doing the fantasy bingo board and what books you're picking. Let me know if you think you've got any great recommendations for me that might be better than any of the ones I've picked. Let's chat down in the comments. Also, do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.